That means action, by the way. Okay. We left off. Where did we leave off? What did we talk about yesterday? Anyone remember? Nope, not a clue.
All over the map.
We were literally all over the map, right? Yeah. Louis showed up. Do you remember which? Yeah. Same person, right?
Yeah, but it's not the same person you said.
Same person, not really. Yeah, Clovis. Louis the First is Clovis, right? Or Clovis the First. Same guy. Very confusing because they sound like two totally different names, but they're actually not only just like the same guy with two different names, they're the same guy with the same name. Very confusing. Yeah, well, we got Charles the Bald, right? Close. Close. We got Charles the Great, otherwise known as Charlemagne. We got Charles the Bald, his son. We have a Louis the Pious, also Charlemagne's son. Anything else that you remember? What's up? Someone was crowned. Yeah, it was Charlemagne. By Pope Leo, the number 3, right? This is why European history gets so frustrating, because you could just guess. It's probably going to be Leo, Charles, Louis. Eventually, we'll get to all the Henrys, right? That's European history. I mean, there's others besides Leo, right? You have Pius. There's a bunch of Piuses. Benedict. There's a lot of Benedicts. Okay, so nonetheless, you only have to memorize a few names. The good news. The bad news is you keep repeating those names until you are very sick of them.
Until you're dead.
Yeah, pretty much. And such is life. Okay, so what happened? Why is Charlemagne kind of a big deal?
Because he took over everything. He did a bunch of things.
Yeah.
I don't think we're there yet, though.
Well, kind of. Where he coagulated something. What does coagulate mean? You don't like what it is, or you don't like the word?
The word.
The word. Does anyone know what is coagulation?
It's like we all lumps up.
Yeah, so when I was in undergrad, I would donate plasma. And I'd get that because, you need money. And they pay you money for that. And then at the end of it, in order to donate plasma, they take your blood out, they put your blood back in. They take it out, put it back in. And every time they're extracting some of the plasma from the blood. And at the end of it, they have to give you what's called anticoagulation. And it stops your blood, because you've taken all that plasma out, and you've also moved it around and oxidized some of it. It stops your blood from becoming a blob, right? You don't want blob blood in your body, because blob blood is, you will get a heart attack if you have that. So it keeps your blood moving. It keeps your blood from forming into a goo that would ultimately kill you. It's good to have, to not be coagulated. But when I say Charlemagne coagulated something, what does that mean then? He made goo, where there previously was not goo. Yeah. What did he make goo of?
The Empire?
The Empire, which was the Franks, the Germans, kind of the Spanish, although we're going to really struggle with them up until the Reconquista time.
Oh yeah, because we weren't that... Okay, well, I'm thinking of the Song of Roland.
That's okay. The Song of Roland happens. Yeah, Song of Roland happens. This is helpful too. If you need to remember the Song of Roland, think about the fact that it takes place in that northern Basque territory of Spain, right? We call this little strip right the Basque land. It's right where the Pyrenees Mountains are. And again, I always imagine the Horseman's Boy when I think of that little strip of land, because below there be desert, above there be France, aka Narnia. I don't know. What book is that?
You know what language it was originally written?
The Chronicles of Narnia? English. Song of Roland. French, but a French Latin.
Okay.
They were kind of, it wasn't fully, it wasn't what we think of today as French, but it was enough French that Clovis would be Louis. How's that?
Okay.
It's enough French where they forgot what the letter S is and they forgot how to pronounce R. That kind of French, right? And we're actually going to get to Song of Roland in just a little while here as well, too. That text in particular becomes important. It becomes important after Charlemagne dies. And historians question how historical it is. Obviously, there's made-up characters in there, right? It's the Muslim emperor of the Umayyad dynasty, who is, or the Caliphate, pardon me, who is plotting against, I was almost going to say Constantine, against Charlemagne, right? That guy who kept repeating himself throughout the Song of Roland. I don't think he was real, but maybe there was someone that was kind of like him, right? Roland himself is a historical figure that we may have some doubt in. I don't know. Anyways, so yeah, it brings about an interesting question as far as what do we know about this time and what is kind of mythologized. Even with Charlemagne himself, right? After all, he is Charles the Great. It sounds kind of mythological, right? And in some senses, some of the things that we know about him are going to be mythological, and we have to separate those things, right? He certainly would be not the primary influence for figures like King Arthur, but you can kind of start to see that he creates this genre of literature, which is about this great, mysterious, noble king who's kind of a fighter in battles and has these group of knights around him. And so this is going to start something in the imagination of the Europeans, which will eventually come into King Arthur, and we'll get all that when we get into Anglican and English history. So that's coming in a minute. Okay. Anything else about Charlemagne that you remember? My notes.
He was Christian?
Yes. So not just Christian too, but in accordance with Pepin and the Merovingian Empire, he was a Trinitarian Christian. And by Trinitarian, I mean that he was a Nicene Christian. He affirmed that there were three persons in the that there are three persons in the Trinity, and yet the Son is of one substance with the Father. This is simultaneously religiously significant and politically significant. It's politically significant because at this point, one of the big differences between Islamic theology and Christianity, especially that's being influenced during this time, is the understanding of the Trinity. Remember, Muslims will still affirm that Jesus is this great prophet, who's maybe even the greatest of prophets besides Muhammad, but they're going to say that he is not co-eternal with the Father, and that there is someone that comes after him. And so Arianism and Islamic theology will slowly blend into one another, such that all the Arians kind of become Muslims. And that's one of the reasons that Muslims are able to, not just through their military conquest, but through their religious conquest, able to take so much ground, especially in areas like Spain, which were Arian up until this point. So by becoming a Trinitarian or Nicene Christian, or continuing to work within Nicene Christianity, he has alliances not only with everyone kind of in France, who is part of the Merovingian Empire, but people who were in who were in Germany, who were in like northern Italy, who he has alliances with people even in the Far East, part of the Pentarchy. He has alliances with the Pope. He has alliances with the Archbishop of Canterbury at this point in England. And so this is very helpful because now you can kind of say we're ultimately on the same side, right? Because we're doing something like defending orthodoxy. And this is a really complicated thing about history. To what degree was Charlemagne simply just a brilliant military strategist who used religion for his own end? And to what degree did he have genuine conviction about the things that he was spreading? Yes. The answer is yes. And as Americans, we tend to think like, no. We gotta keep these two categories totally separate, right? Either he was doing these big military campaigns because he thought they were good, or because he wanted to spread something like Nicene orthodoxy. It's probably not that simple for him, which is this broad, nebulous thing that we call Christendom, right? He is simultaneously conquering lands and spreading the gospel, and he does not see those in tension with one another. He does not see civil authority and religious authority in tension with one another. And that's why he's going around and he's like, oh, y'all need bishops and archbishops. Let's set those up, right? And I'm going to give you access to the Pope. And so then finally this kind of comes to a head in 799 AD. What happens then? Something happens. We talked about Leo already. What happens with Leo?
What? Is that where he crowns him?
That's going to happen in 800. What happens in order to get the crowning kind of taken place?
Well, doesn't the Pope have to go and use him to hide?
Yeah, Leo the Lion has to kind of timidly run away. Great irony, right? He has got to run into the foot of the mountain, the Piedmonte area, and a little bit north of that. And Charlemagne more or less carries him under his mantle, right? Says, you're going to be good. In my territory, you're good, Leo. He's already conquered the Lombards at that point. Leo had been under some tension from the east. and especially Constantinople and other areas around that. And so when he came back, when it was safe for him to come back, he, yes, of course, invites Constantine over. Says, Constantine, my dude, come to church with me. Again, this is a complicated scene because Leo's inviting Constantine to Rome on Christmas. Charlemagne. Those C's, they end up mixing together. However much I've been saying Constantine in the last few minutes, I've been meaning Charlemagne. Charlemagne is brought to Rome as a good Christian. He shows up on Christmas and is crowned king. And we don't know if he planned it. We don't know if he knew about it. We don't know if he liked it. People are divided on that. And once he's king, what is he king of? Who is he king of, according to Leo? The Romans, right? Which is, I mean, imagine if I was to crown someone in like South Africa as like king of the Aztecs right now. First off, that would be laughable because I don't have the authority to crown anyone. But let's imagine that this actually made sense. And I was to say, you, behold, are the king of the Aztecs. You'd be like, what? Aztecs have been dead for a while, right? Aztecs, they're like Native Americans of South America. In some areas, they were, like with the Mayans, particularly brutal. And they were largely conquered by Spain.
They have a cool flag.
Cool, yeah. This is a weird thing. This is a weird thing. So calling someone the king of the Romans in the Western Empire, at least in the East, it kind of makes sense because you still have an emperor. You still have a loose confederacy of nation states and peoples. In the West, it's like, yo, I don't know if you know this, but Rome has been gone for like 300 years. So calling someone the king of the Romans is a bit of an odd thing. Why in the world would Leo do that? And why would Charlemagne take that as a politically advantageous thing?
To kind of reclaim themselves as like the Romans.
100%. We are the Romans, right? No longer are we going to be this loose, like, humdrum group of peasants who haven't been able to come together at all. But like now, we have a king. We are Romans. We are the new Rome. And again, think back to like Daniel chapter 8 and some of the prophecies therein, where there's clear prophecy that from Rome, from the Roman Empire, will come something like Christendom. This is really being like, this is kind of a claim that's saying, hey, this is ultimately happened, and it's happening not only in the East with the continuing to remain like Byzantine Empire, but it's happening in the West. And of course, as we know it, even though the Byzantine Empire at this point in history looks a lot stronger, and it will continue to exist for hundreds of years, almost 1,000 years actually, it will be evident that the Western whatever's going on in the West will be way stronger, more formidable, and more influential for history, right? Think about who comes from the West. You ultimately end up having France. They kind of do a lot of things in the world. Germany, they do a lot of things in the world. Spain, Austria, Italy, England, all of these countries that we tend to think as really dominant figures in the geopolitics of the last several hundred years are from the Western half. Meanwhile, the Eastern half has important people nonetheless, but just slightly less influential, at least from where we're standing from. People like Greece, Turkey, all of Asia Minor, right? Nothing to sneeze at, right? But like, if you're going to say what's more historically influential, nothing to sneeze at, nothing to shake your finger at. But it does seem pretty obvious if you take even a broad sweep of history. You're going to see, yeah, one of these is much more significant than the other for world affairs, right? So that's the thing to kind of keep in mind. That's our nice little review. Okay. That was just our review, and that was a review of a review. It's like the third or fourth time we've covered this material, so like, goodness me, we got to get going. Let's see. Church Reform, 799, fled. The Treaty of Verdun, that is, Charlemagne has died. unfortunately.
Haha.
His son, Louis the Pious, takes his place. Louis kind of does an okay job, but the empire starts to fall apart, or the nation of Europe, as you will, the western half of the empire starts to fall apart again a little bit. We've seen this. It plays out every time. Someone coagulates it, and lo and behold, there's a heart attack, right? After Louis dies, they signed the Treaty of Verdun, Verdun, and it divides the empire into those three portions, right? The east, the west, and the coveted middle, right? The middle is what we know of as the Middle Kingdom, and that's the area that everyone wants. Why? Because it has the most important cities at the time, especially northern Italy, and the city of Rome as well, too. And then it goes all the way up to the sea right here. So it goes like that nice little chunk. What we see of today is like Amsterdam and Belgium would be included in that too. You're just across the way from England, so like you got a lot of power there. Whereas the east will ultimately become what we know of today as Germany, and the west will ultimately become what we know today as France, right? With a little section that they both give away in as well too. Which is why even to this day, sections like the Loire Valley, which is right here, kind of next to Luxembourg, are still fought over as whether or not they're German or French. The people that live there will sometimes identify as German, sometimes they'll identify as French. They'll identify as the nation of France.
I am France.
Je suis la révolution. It's something that Napoleon said as soon as he conquered France. He said, I am the revolution. So I am France. I love it.
I'm sure Europe would love to see another flag, and it's just Luxembourg.
We're all waiting, right?
all the Luxembourgians.
Okay, so this is why still to this day there's fighting over this border. Like who gets to take this border and what and where and why. For those of you who are on camera, I'm pointing out the most important things of your life over there, but you won't ever know them. Too bad. Okay, we got Charles the Bald. Charles the Bald takes the west, right? Louis the German takes what becomes Germany, and then Lothair ends up taking that Middle Kingdom area. Okay. So, very, very cool. He goes all the way down to the Papal States, right? And we've talked about the Papal States. Remember, that's the area that the Pope kind of receives as his own jurisdiction. He's going to keep that until just after Leo the 13th, who died in the 1800s. Or 1903 is when he died. Okay. Simultaneously, we have invasions from Muslims. We have invasions from Magirs, who are coming like way from the east and ultimately can settle down in Hungary. And then we have invasions from Vikings, and Vikings invade everyone and they kill everyone, but then they end up integrating into everything, and they just kind of mix up society in some interesting ways. Once they've mixed up society, there's an important change of how civilizations work through vassalage, right? Remember, a lord has a vassal. This is someone who has sworn an oath of allegiance to him to be able to protect him in some ways. Lords are also sometimes military figures who have sworn some sorts of oath of allegiance to something like a king. But nonetheless, what's going to become really important is that they end up becoming vassals, or they end up having vassals themselves. So in the 8th century, an individual who served a lord in a military capacity was known as a vassal. This person swore an oath of loyalty to their leader. And again, I talked about how horses during this time were specifically bred to be able to carry knights in all of their armor and regalia, and at a speed that they could actually fight at. Up to this point, horses couldn't really do that. There are some interesting historical events that happened with barnyard animals and stuff. Like, fun fact, sheep used to have much bigger tails, like comically big tails. You can actually see sheep that would have been more similar to what we see described in Scripture. If you read Scripture about how to sacrifice sheep, they have these large, fatty tail, and it looks like a beaver almost. Now, not only do a lot of times they get their tails cut off anyways, but like nowadays for infection stuff, like you might do with like a Cocker Spaniel or other types of dogs like this. But we've also bred out that kind of fatty part of the tail because they can tend to bring about infections. If someone wants to look up like an ancient sheep picture with a fatty tail, I'm sure we would all just love to see this. This blew my mind because you read Scripture and it talks about what to do with all the tail parts, and you're like, I maybe don't know what a sheep is.
Oh.
Yeah, show it around.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Like a black and white one.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
That's weird.
Anyways, they would have been especially fatty and helped him keep a little bit warm during the winter. So this happens in Europe. We get rid of those nice little tails, and also we change our horses to become stronger to be able to carry you during battle, and they become a little bit more regal animals, if that's fair to say. I'm sure that Quinn would agree. Horse and his boy reference there. There we go. I ate my job.
No, it's good.
It's so good.
Rose said she hated it.
Oh, it's so good. Horse and his boy is just like,
You can't say you hate Narnia.
yeah, if you do, get out.
He's gonna kick you out.
I will.
I
will.
If you do, I think this school is just done.
Yeah. Done with you. No, I weep for you because you don't weep for Narnia. This allows for knights to come into the picture, right? Again, as I mentioned, if you have these horses that are able to carry people in battle, this is not something that you can just overnight, pun intended, decide that you're going to be able to do, right? You can't just be like, I'm going to become a knight in battle.
Oh, I thought you meant about the horses.
Well, no, the horses more or less, like, they're good to go, right? They do need trained and stuff like this. It's not as if, like, they're immediately military horses, but they have the natural muscle and capacity that they need. The individuals who are going to fight in battle, though, need to undergo severe training. And as this, the lords are going to have to pay them a lot more. So no longer can you just simply say, hey, you fight for me, I give you some bread, you take it back to your family, you have bread, all that kind of stuff, right? Now you have an occupation where you are a military figure, right? You are a knight. And this is going to actually be really influential in shaping how Europe forms because, well, if you're a lord and you want to have a military, you have to have a really expansive way to pay for your military, and you have to convince people that it's worth training for the majority of their young adult lives and then ultimately risking that entire training to go into battle, right? This is a big cost. And so suddenly the lords end up deciding, I'm going to give out plots of my lands to these vassals, if you will. And these vassals will ultimately become the things that we know of as knights. Let's see, where did my notes go? Here we go. And so the land that a vassal owned was known as either a fief or a fief. I'm totally fine with either pronunciation. I think I hear fief a little bit more, but I don't know, it doesn't flow off the tongue. So after Charlemagne, again, we're at the death of Charlemagne, this is kind of spreading about. Now you have all these lords with their vassals and little tiny fiefs and villages and stuff like that. And so the central power structure that allows for this to take place more or less crumbles, but the structure where there's these little lords and pockets of lords with their communities that surround them continue to exist. So strangely enough, we have a re-decentralizing of Europe, but now there's a collective identity still, right? Everyone still more or less feels like we are the Romans once again. We are from Germany to France to Spain to England, all this kind of stuff. We are one unit. So there's still a collective idea that there's a oneness going on, but everyone more or less has their own lord that they are obliged by. And I talked about at the beginning of the year, too, this is when you have the translation of Adonai as Lord take place, right? Because the Lord was, after all, someone that took you in, gave you what you needed, and offered some form of protection in exchange for your life, for your service to him, right? And so translators of Scripture were like, this is a really good way of translating some of like Kyrios and Adonai and things along those lines. The longer this went on, though, the more what we call sub-infeudation systems existed. Feudalism was this system of you have the Lord, you have those who, like the vassalage and all that kind of stuff. Sub-infeudation is exactly what you would think. It basically means that not only did the Lord have his own vassal, but the vassal had his own vassal. And that vassal had his own vassal. And so like all these little parcels of land split up smaller and smaller and smaller until you just have the peasants, right? And the peasants were basically the ground workers. The peasants would eventually have an area of land known of as a manor. And a manor would include the area that was the lord's proper. and land that they were allowed to work on and rent out. Now, they wouldn't rent out by paying money. They would rent out by basically tithing the food that they made from that area. So now, like, the smallest unit of land is going, let's say it looks like this. See it on the screen? Yeah. It looks like this. Oh, I want a better one. Is this better? C'est bon? C'est bon. Okay. We have a little land like this. We're going to call this a manor. It's impossible to see. M-A-N-O-R. And a manor is basically going to be divided. You might have a chunk of it, we'll say this chunk, which belongs to the Lord proper. And everything else is being rented out by the individual people that are there. And they have to tithe and do all their collections and stuff. They had to spend 3 days of the week working on the Lord's section. And the rest of it, they could do whatever they want. So this was basically the section that they ended up having it covered the cost of their rent. And as long as they spent 3 days doing this here, and those 3 days weren't even throughout the entire year, it was primarily during harvest seasons, and like January to February was a really hot season as well. Not like literally hot, but like it was a busy season for them as well. As long as they worked during those periods of time, they would be able to more or less live free. Which is, I think, a fascinating thing, because sometimes we think of the feudalistic times as people just like working like dogs day and night. In all actuality, yeah, they typically worked about 3 days a week. They would also have to do their own farming and stuff for their family, so this would take up a good amount of time as well, too. But that was their life, and then they had their nice little lord that they lived under. And there was that system of subsidiary relations, right? Where you would report to the person that was immediately hired to you. So if you're a peasant, you have some sort of lord that's looking over you, and that lord might have a lord that's looking over them, and that lord has a lord looking over them. And the goal of it was that the top lord, or the king, or whoever it ended up being, ultimately didn't intervene in your life that often. That was considered to be highly unethical. Now, that person had a ton of power. He could just basically say, hey, you go to Spain. Go fight for me. But this was considered wildly unethical if it was in a way that would endanger the life of his or her vassalage and peasants and all that kind of stuff, too. So a pretty little decent system going on. Healthcare wasn't really a great thing at the time. But nonetheless, we persevere. Okay. A manor was an agricultural estate operated by a lord and worked on by peasants. A manor might be a village, or if it's a really big manor, it could actually include a multiplicity of villages. So you might have like 3 or 4 villages all included under the lord's manor. In unpredictable circumstances, small farmers who needed protection during times of bad harvest would actually give up their freedom in return for protection. And so these small farmers or peasants we would know formally as serfs. So they would say, I'm no longer going to be a free person. I will not only serve the lord of this area, but I will actually give up my freedom to this lord. And now that person will be bound more or less permanently to the land. That's when they start having to pay rent. That's when they work the manor. And by the 9th century, we have a whopping 60% of Europeans in like the western area that we've been talking about. 60% of them are serfs. So 60% of them have given up their freedom in exchange for being able to care for some land, tithe their land to, they would tithe what they made to the church, they would give another portion of it to the Lord, and they would take another portion of it for themselves, and they would just be agricultural farmers. During this period of time, by the way, the Byzantine Empire is like going hog wild on trading and technology, not technology in the sense we would think of it today, but like they're working on their arts and their silks and all these kind of things. And Europe is more or less a very quiet but stable community of farmers with their lords and little castles and stuff like this, right? And this is what we think of now. We're really officially in the Middle Ages, right? The Middle Ages began, we said, kind of with the sacking of Rome, the first, second, or third. But really at this point now, this is the Middle Ages. There's a collective identity throughout Europe. Everyone's like, yep, we're on the same team. We are Latins, we are Romans, we are Europeans, maybe. They wouldn't use that terminology, but still. And yet, there's kind of a decentralized power structure. Because Charlemagne had conquered and had these close alliances with the Pope has a lot of jurisdictions all the way up north to at least the wall. Why am I blanking on the name? want to say Herod's wall. It's not Herod. Who's the wall guy? Someone, do you remember? Hadrian's Wall, thank you. All the way north to Hadrian's Wall, which is like the border of Scotland. Right? We talked about this. We did this. All the way up north there. All the way down really to like right here in Italy. This area is all going to ultimately be conquered by Muslims for a little while. So just everything kind of south of Rome proper. Cool. Speaking of the Byzantine Empire, there's some things that we got to talk about. This, I think, will only take the last 5 minutes of class, so this is perfect. So by the 7th and 8th centuries, approximately the same time, a little bit earlier than that, the Byzantine Empire consisted primarily of southern Italy and Asia Minor. That little southern portion right here, Asia Minor is like right around there. So that's the Byzantine Empire, included Constantinople, kind of that without which it is not the Byzantine Empire. But it kind of expands a little bit more going into the 10th century. Now, as a reminder, 1054 AD is when you're going to formally have the Great Schism, at which point the Eastern Empire and the Western, whatever you want to call it, split irreconcilably, right? 1054 is the Great Schism between the East and the West, religiously and politically. Up until this point, the East and the West kind of are getting along. The East is becoming increasingly concerned about what they are seeing from the Pope. Okay, they're saying, okay, we have this pentarchy thing going on, but ever since the Roman Empire fell away, the Pope is doing a lot of things, right? And one of those becomes an issue under the reign of Emperor Michael III, right? Michael III. He is, pardon me. He's not the emperor. Who's the emperor? That can't be, I don't know who the emperor is. Michael III was the patriarch of Constantinople. I apologize. I forget who the emperor was during that time. So Michael was the patriarch. The emperor demotes him. Says, you're no longer the patriarch. I instead want a guy named Photius, or Photius. Photius, Photius. And I'm going to put him up as the patriarch of Constantinople. I like him. He's cool. There was some worry about why in the world this guy was being put as the patriarch, because he was a layman at the time. It'd be as if you or me suddenly becoming the patriarch of Constantinople if we happened to live there, right? He's just a dude, and now suddenly he has one of the most important positions in the Christian world. And the Pope at that point did not like this one little bit. It was Pope Nicholas I, and he said, I'm not down for this. So, in 858 AD, Photius becomes the Patriarch of Constantinople, and Nicholas I is like, that's the Pope. He's like, absolutely not. I don't like this. You just took someone down who was qualified. You put someone who was not qualified. I smell something foul. Like, is there some sort of political alliance that I don't know what's going on? So as a response, in 863, Nicholas excommunicates Photius, who's one of the pentarchy. So like to excommunicate one of the pentarchy is kind of a big deal. Because at this point, we've been seeing these 5 patriarchs have been more or less working with one another. And now you have one of them excommunicating the other one. And that brings up that everyone goes into a tizzy, right? They're like, what in the world does that mean? Are you allowed to excommunicate someone? What are you saying about your own power if you're allowed to excommunicate someone like this? During this same time, maybe fortunately or unfortunately, Nicholas starts implementing, for separate reasons, implementing the use of that little word, filioque, not ferioque, that's from the Barbara, filioque, into the Nicene Creed. And this goes fine in the West. Part of the reasons in the West is like people are having a lot of conversations about the role of the Holy Spirit, whether or not the Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son. And there's kind of some theological conversations that are happening in the West. There's also theological conversations that are happening in the East about the manner of the procession of the Holy Spirit. And like I said, this is a big deal because the persons are equal with their relations in God, which means that if we have a different conception about how these persons relate to one another, well, we seem to have different trinities going on. So Nicholas kind of introduces this into the Nicene Creed. Photius is not a big fan of that, right? He's not going to have it. And so he protests, and he ultimately brings together a lot of different people from the East to kind of convene in a council. So they're then going to go back to Nicholas the First and excommunicate him. They say, you excommunicated Photius, Pope Nicholas, therefore Pope Nicholas, we excommunicate you. Now, this sounds like the entire world between East and West has just ruptured, but somewhat surprisingly, a new emperor comes around and actually just reinstates Nicholas and his successor, Pope Adrian, and says, you're no longer excommunicated, you're good to go. And also reinstates gets rid of Photius and reinstates the Patriarch of Constantinople that was before him, Ignatius. So wait, who is it? Is maybe, yeah. So back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Yeah, that's all we really have time for here. The East is going to hold your horses. I will just say this much: the East is going to pretty shortly after this rush up and start to conquer religiously Russia. And this is ultimately how you'll get Russian Orthodox around this time as well, too. So, we now have, for a minute, the East and the West had excommunicated one another. Now they're back together for at least a minute. 1054 is coming, and at 1054 there will be an irreconcilable split between the two groups. That's kind of more or less the end of the historical section. We will have a little quiz on this sometime soon. I'll post my notes, though. They're already up there. I just have to click the publish button. You can look through those as well, too. And I'll let you know when that quiz is going to be. It's going to be in part dependent on me finalizing the new logic schedule for the next couple of weeks as well, too. So, peace to you. That's all I have.